So we're going to break it into 2 sessions. We're going to have a high-level introductory session with the esteemed guests here beside me, and then we're going to proceed from there to have a more detailed discussion about the delivery of solutions, which after all is what today is all about. So without further ado, I'm going to start with our very first speaker, which is the Minister for Education for Ghana, Minister Adutwum. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I don't know whether it's good or bad to be the first, but I take it as good. It's indeed an honor, and Prof. Sachs, for all the work you do for education. I'm really appreciative of your efforts in Ghana, especially towards meeting the SDG goals, and we are very appreciative. And to all of you who made it possible for us to be here, I'm truly appreciative. Ghana is undergoing a major transformation in education. We're looking at the relevance of our education system. We're looking at access. And of course, we're looking at the quality of the education system. The President of the Republic 6 years ago decided that secondary education should no longer be the preserve of the rich, that everyone in Ghana should have access to secondary education. So we began the implementation of the free senior high school. Now we are making great strides, beginning with 800,000 students. Now we have 1.3 million students in high school. The country had to fall back on leapfrogging strategies. We began the implementation of year-round schools, as was happening in California. I happen to have taught in the California school system. For 10 years, I became a charter school developer in South Los Angeles for another 12 years. So I knew the U.S. system inside and out and needed to also borrow from America to influence the way we implemented our strategy. For those who know South Los Angeles, you know that I'm a survivor, having taught there for 10 years. And coming into the Ghanaian space, we wanted to borrow from everywhere. So we used the year-round system, was able to increase enrollment in secondary schools by 50%. And since it was free then, we were able to also increase our gender parity. Until then, most parents will make a decision as to whether we send a girl child to school or the boy. And invariably, it was the boy. The girl was left at home. So 5 years ago, our gender parity was 0.92, and now it's 0.99. Next year, we think we'll maintain the 1-to-1. Which will be a great accomplishment for any country, especially for a sub-Saharan African country. Now, in terms of open education resources, we had to take a look seriously at how we bring about quality through technology. So we were able to have a homegrown solution called the iBox. It's a device that emits local Wi-Fi, so we could access quality content that has been developed and saved on that device like a server. So wherever you are within a 1-mile radius, you are able to access the content on that system. And it was developed in Ghana, made in Ghana for Ghanaians. And this device has been very helpful. Now the content has been moved online, and consequently, our schools with internet access can have access to quality content, because you see, in a number of the schools in the rural areas, it's difficult to get a high-performing physics teacher or chemistry teacher. But once the content is developed by these high-performing teachers and they are stored on the iBox, then schools in remote areas can have access to this quality content without having internet connectivity. They get it from the local Wi-Fi through the iBox. We also in Ghana are using other solutions supported by UNICEF, called the Learning Passport. So this is also another open education resource that is helping us. But we have an agency called SENDLOS, Center for Open Distance and Open Learning. And this organization is championing the development of open resources for us. We also want to ensure, in alignment with relevance of the education system, we want to increase the number of students pursuing STEM-related courses. Now, it means that you need a lab. We don't have the resources to build science labs everywhere. So we then worked with Open University UK and developed virtual labs. So once we have a projector, we are able to teach chemistry in every school in Ghana. So what that also means, I always joke with it and say, hey, you do the chemistry experiment and the chemical blows up in front of you, you still will not get hurt. So we're able to do chemistry without the wet lab. We're able to do fixes without all the tools. So we are now on track to promoting STEM education and boosting the STEM enrollment in the country. We began the construction of STEM girls' schools, and Kuwait Fund has supported 2 schools. Other organizations have come on board in providing funding for the construction of STEM schools. So in Ghana, there's a major boost for STEM education through open education resource and also through the construction of wet labs. So a number of things are happening. I don't know my time, so I don't want to overstay my welcome, you know.
I think we'd love to keep listening to you for as long as you would like to speak, but...
I always have to remind myself, you know, I'm a teacher. Teachers talk, right? And my new profession as a politician, you also, if you don't talk, you're in trouble. So, so I always want to make sure that I'm not overstepping my welcome. And so we are now building a virtual high school supported by South Korea. And this virtual high school is going to give us access to quality education in remote locations. And the interesting thing is that the shortage of teachers doesn't become a problem because teachers can teach from one school and it's all sent to remotely to other schools. So it's a big boost for us in terms of ensuring that we can improve the relevance of our education system. We know that STEM, and you can say STEAM, holds the key to our transformation. But when you have limited resources, you use technology to do what is impossible. So we are full steam ahead in terms of ensuring that we can increase the numbers of our students participating in STEM and STEAM, and that is how we put to rest the issue of rote memorization. You can't do rote memorization in STEM. You have to really participate in the learning process and make sure that we can get the critical mass, that with the critical minds that we need for our transformation. You see, I always say that from my experience in the US, going back to Ghana, we have good children in Ghana, so respectful. But I go to schools upon schools and I speak with the students. And when I finish speaking with them, I'll say, do you have a question for me? No hand goes up. A hand is just to go up. In all my encounters in Ghanaian classrooms, we have tamed the children. We just want them to write down what we tell them. At the day of exams, they should put down what we have told them. We say, you are the best student the country has ever known. That kind of education system will not transform Ghana. That kind of education system is not going to give us critical thinking individuals, especially since we are in the 21st century and education 4.0, the 4th industrial revolution. You can't memorize your way out of poverty, but you can critically think and innovate out of poverty. So Ghanaian schools, African schools have to begin to take a serious look at what I call the assertive curriculum. A curriculum that empowers the African child to ask questions and challenge the status quo respectfully within the African cultural context. But not a curriculum that tells the African child to be quiet and don't say anything when the adult is speaking. And tell the adult back, tell him back wherever he was told. That kind of education system, I don't care if we get to the point where every African child is in school. If you put all of them in school and do not change the way you teach them by empowering them to be assertive individuals, you will still not transform Africa through education. So as we embark on access, we also have to look at the quality and the relevance of the education system that will truly put us in a space where education can become the most important socioeconomic transformation agent. Our education system now is not going to be what transforms our continent. And we need to take a serious look. I know about Ghana, I know about other countries. If you are a country in Africa and an exception, then you are good. But I know that invariably, we want to tame the children. The quietest child in the class is deemed as the most respectful. And we have to begin to take a serious look at the curricula, the pedagogy, the strategy that we are using so that Africa will be transformed through education when we have the critical mass with critical mind to really challenge the status quo so that we can innovate ourselves out of poverty through education. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Minister. And it's always great to have a genuine educator, someone who spent a large chunk of their life as a teacher in a school here as a Minister of Education, and to share your wisdom with us. And I think particularly when it comes to open education resources, it's that last delivery mile which you were talking about in Ghana with the iBoxes, which is something that is absolutely essential, and as well combined with sort of the material you put into those, which again in terms of the curriculum and stuff like that is really important. But again, the innovations that are taking place in Ghana certainly set a great example for all of us. If I might turn now to our second speaker, which is the Minister of Education and Religious Affairs from Greece, Minister Kerameus. If I can hand the table over to you.
Thank you so much. It is a great honor and pleasure to be here with you today to discuss this most important question of ensuring free and open access to high-quality educational resources for teachers and learners around the world. And it's a true honor to be among such a distinguished group, and I would like to express my sincere thanks and congratulations to the UN SDSN for the great work they have achieved so far in pushing forward the agenda of Sustainable Goal number 4. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals have set a roadmap for a better future aimed at tackling poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. And while there is an SDG that is dedicated to education, I believe, Professor Sachs, most of us would agree that citizen empowerment through education is critical in achieving most SDGs, not just number 4. The dissemination of knowledge and high quality information is, in my opinion, key catalyst for change. So I would like to very briefly share some thoughts on increasing circulation of knowledge. How can we ensure that we have more information circulating freely? And I will refer specifically to 3 different points. One has to do with universities, second has to do with schools, third has to do with vocational education and training. And starting off with universities. In Greece, just a month ago this summer, a new bill was voted in Parliament which is directly aimed at strengthening the link, the ties between the free public university system of Greece and society. We have provided a clear and comprehensive legal framework to support innovation in universities, to create incubators and pre-incubators for startup and spin-off companies in order to foster innovation. Research-based innovation which can be applied to solve real problems existing in society. We remain also committed to pushing forward with more open access research journals which facilitate the circulation of knowledge. And I think we have to unite our forces even further and ensure that while respecting international copyright laws and national legislations, we have to ensure that knowledge travels as widely and as broadly as possible. We have also introduced a legal requirement for all universities to develop a sustainable development plan in order to integrate sustainability in educational, research, and operational activities. And we think this is fundamental in assisting universities to pivot further towards a model of education and research activity which is future-minded and future-proof. Now coming to schools, primary and secondary education. In Greece, we have revamped over 160 school curricula in order to place the acquisition of skills at the very heart of learning, along with integrating sustainability across disciplines. During the pandemic, we invested heavily in the digital transformation of education with the provision of digital equipment to students and schools in an unprecedented scale. We negotiated zero-rated access to the internet for every single member of the education community and extensive teacher training. We have what we call our open education resource platform. It's called Lighttree. It has all school books and other digital material freely available online, and we are investing further in digital education. Lighttree will become an even larger repository of free and high quality content. And in addition, a new module we introduced 2 years ago called the Skills Labs, which has all of its education material openly and freely accessible online for all educators, students, and parents to access, an innovation which we believe helps in bringing forth optimal education results. Third and last level, vocational educational and training. We have radically reformed the way VET models are set by involving social partners in the process of curriculum formation, so that what students actually learn is relevant to what society really needs. Let me just give you one example. Greece is undertaking a great effort to decarbonize. In order to do that, we have introduced courses for technicians for renewable energy sources. We have established model vet schools and introduced what we call thematic, post-secondary thematic vet institutes, so as to enhance the overall quality of vet education. And we are increasing the funding for vet and upgrading facilities such as laboratories and workshops and their digital infrastructure. We truly think that vet is an area of education which can greatly benefit from creating open educational resource repositories, which is traditionally not prioritized. And so we would like to call on fellow countries and other stakeholders to work closely together in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to free and open access to high-quality education resources, we believe it is essential to aim as broadly as possible and to include all areas of education, as well as working closely together. This will ensure that we will achieve our common goal, and I believe our common goal to be to have knowledge circulate as freely and as openly as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think the work that's taking place in Greece in terms of making the curriculum and education materials from schools freely available is the foundation on which we can build open access across the world. And the materials available in Greece is just as useful in other countries as it is in Greece. And it's the kind of thing which you need to look at in terms of how you move from there to what's happening in Ghana in terms of delivering to actual people on the ground. So now I'll turn to our third speaker, who perhaps needs no introduction. At least today he's probably been introduced about 7 times, I would imagine. So Jeffrey Sachs, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and ministers, congratulations. We're blessed to have 2 of the world's dynamic ministers of education with us, and both have told a story of incredible encouragement, showing what can be done. In Ghana, when President Akufo-Addo came to office, he said, of course, we need every student to have an education up through upper secondary, just like SDG 4 said. And he picked a phenomenal minister of education, made free education available up through upper secondary, and we've heard the result today, and you should be very, very proud. It's a model for the whole world. And I also could not be more thrilled with Minister Kerameus's innovations and dynamic reforms in Greece. You know, when we think about Western civilization and Western culture, without question, for 1,000 years, if you really wanted to go to a good school, you went to Athens. From roughly 350 BC, if not earlier, at least up through 500 AD, everything was, you know, Cambridge, Mass, Cambridge, England, nothing. Athens, that was it. And that's what it's going to be in the 21st century also. Because if you've been to Athens, you want to keep going to Athens. And students from all over the world and scholars from all over the world are going to be, I think, flooding to Athens for the 21st century education as well. Because what the minister's reforms are doing is opening up the education process so that it is a worldwide public good. Partnerships all over the world, new opportunities for training all over the world. And I personally could not be more thrilled, because every chance I get, I go to Athens to see what's happening and to imbibe our whole Western civilizational history. But you're creating something extraordinarily powerful, and it's going to have an absolutely profound effect for everybody and benefit for everybody. I'm wondering, in the spirit of open curricula, whether we could somehow help to share and spread some of that vocational training, because that is needed everywhere. And when you talked about, for example, experts that can put photovoltaics in place or put solar energy in place. I'm sure the minister would say, we need that too, because we need technicians out in Kumasi or in Tamale or in whatever other areas to get those PV modules up, and that's a fantastic opportunity. So I hope we could do some business also in creating some open education resources, because what you're creating is extraordinarily important. You know, my own experience in being a professor for 42 years now is that for the first 25 or 30 years, nothing changed, maybe not even my lectures, but you'd stand there and you'd talk to a classroom, and that was education. And that wasn't so different, actually, from how Plato and Aristotle did it in 350 BC also, except they walked along and the students ran along behind them, taking notes. But education, it was a little boring technologically. You talked, students listened, they took notes. That was basically the end of the story. Now everything is changing phenomenally. And you get into a classroom with 18 universities simultaneously online, and the students are doing joint projects, and you pull things off the media, and it's incredible what is possible right now, and how the, quote, business model of education can change as well. I come from a university that charges a lot of money for tuition, and I don't know what will happen to that model in the future, but I'd like to see some competition, because we can now do all of this almost for free, because we can have faculty or professors or graduate students giving classes that anyone can join. As economists, we say the marginal cost of another student coming online is zero. When I log in on my Columbia University account, I have immediate access to, I don't know how many, I was trying to find out, but I would guess 30 or 40,000 scientific journals. And I can get to the full repository, I can download anything, and I do that many, many times a day. Now, the journals have to survive and make money and be able to cover their costs, so there has to be a business model of subscriptions and so forth. But the truth is, the marginal cost of adding another person with access to those journals is zero. We should be in a world in which any student anywhere can have access to all of the scientific knowledge that is online, all of the newspapers that are online. And this is what we're talking about today, how to model that, how to ensure that, yes, there are real costs for journals or for academic materials that need to be paid, but we're in a nearly zero marginal cost world right now, meaning that we can expand access dramatically. And we can not only expand access dramatically, we can improve the quality of the information and the teaching and the training dramatically. Minister, your, what do you call it, the box? The iBox. We need the iBoxes everywhere. This morning I was with some very creative philanthropists in a foundation in Brazil, which is using Starlink now to connect indigenous communities in the Amazon, because now every community wants and needs knowledge, needs access for survival as well as for well-being. And we can reach everybody now. So that's the idea of open education resources. At SDSN, we have the wonderful SDG Academy. Several of the leaders are here. Paul Walsh, Amber Webb, and many others I know are in the room and are also listening online. It's a fantastic team. Our commitment from the first day was, it's free. You take it. We go out, we ask for generous philanthropists to cover the fixed costs. But after that, put it online, let everybody use it. Let's make higher education degrees quality that don't cost thousands of dollars for tuition, but are just basically almost for free, because that's feasible as well. And if we're creative, we can do what we're here to do, which is to make sure that every person in this world gets the education that they need. And I didn't say every child, because all of us need to learn every day. We're in a world of change. And there's a lot of stress that goes along with that, by the way. But we need to be able to learn, to absorb information. The critical thinking that Greece is emphasizing in the curriculum is something we need every day of our lives now. Things we're told in the media, not true most of the time, by the way. And so we need critical thinking to be able to say, you know, that doesn't make sense, but I can understand it this way. And that is part of what we need to do in lifelong learning as well. So our purpose today, we're going to have some technical panels coming up to describe precise steps for a dramatic expansion of open education resources. But please, for everybody here, think about what you need and also what you can contribute to open education resources, because I think we can get the job done. So thank you very much for being together, and we're going to be moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Sachs. And I think, as you say quite clearly, we have the education material that we need. It's how we get it to people who need that material. And that's certainly, I think, the next few speakers are going to talk about. The last speaker in our introductory session is the Assistant Director General for Communications and Information from UNESCO, Mr. Jelassi. And again, I mean, UNESCO's recommendations in terms of how you run open education resources are absolutely the core foundation on which a lot of the work that's taking place has been built. So I think it'll be very interesting to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think the preceding speakers said it very eloquently. I'm also a teacher, by the way, so I know when to start talking, but I don't know when to stop. The chairman will keep me in order. So the previous speakers, and you had two very strong testimonies from Greece and Ghana on how open education resources brought about profound impact. Professor Sachs made a strong plea for why these should be made available free of charge to all, and education and research journals and publications. I taught for more than 35 years, and I taught a lot in sub-Saharan Africa, in parts of Asia. And there, when I say, this is the textbook I want to use for my courses, the school administration looked at me and said, but you know, Professor, for a single copy of that textbook, we have to pay $120. And in your class, there are a few hundreds involved. I say, okay, let's drop the textbooks. Let's use case studies. They say, yeah, but we get charged $5 per single case study, multiplied by the number of students. We simply financially cannot afford it. But we have textbooks from maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago. We can use those. But of course, how can we use material that is 8, 10 years old? We have to leverage the latest research publications, the latest case study development, the latest writing, but they cannot afford it. So open educational resources is changing the educational landscape, because they are, as you know, license-free, open to all, free of charge. You can use, you can disseminate, you can modify. Being a computer scientist at origin, this allows me to make a small analogy with open source software some 45 years ago. Some of you may recall at the time we had to buy packaged software, which cost a lot of money. Not everybody was able to buy them and to pay for them. And then came open source software. And that was music to the ear of all program developers, because they don't have to infringe copyrights. They can use, build on, modify, etc. So for me, I make the analogy between open educational resources and what we have seen in the IT industry as far as open source software. So why I'm saying this? Because this summit is about transforming education. Why shall we do that? Why transforming? What are we transforming? And how can we transform? So for me, there are three key questions to answer: the why, the what, and the how. If we don't convincingly answer each one of them, we may have the skeptics. We may have those who will resist the transformation. OER is part of the how. How to transform education? OER brings digital platforms with a huge amount of information and knowledge, up to date, cutting edge, that can leverage. And we can create the learning value for our students, for our pupils. Professor Sachs mentioned about the economic, or he said today, the development and the deployment has a marginal cost to it. He's absolutely right. He can teach to thousands of students worldwide. I want to take the other extreme of the spectrum. For me, the highest educational value is a one-to-one relationship. A professor with a student, a tutor with a student, a coach with a pupil, the one-to-one relationship. That we never can see in a school, at universities, because there is a high economic cost to it. Can we put a professor with only one student? No way. We can put a professor with 50, 100, 200 students. But online we can. Through digital, we can have a one-to-one relationship. We can call that customization of the educational value, because students are not alike. Some are speed learners, some are slow learners. Some have a passion for the subject A, some have a passion for subject B. So if you want really to customize the learning to that one single student, there is no substitute to digitally enabled delivery of education. So I just wanted to add to what Professor Sachs very clearly said. The other extreme of the spectrum, or the other end of the spectrum, the one-to-one relationship, in addition to, of course, educating the masses. Let me here also pick on what the esteemed minister from Ghana said, the importance of critical thinking. We have developed quite a bit of material at UNESCO, apart from the 2019 UNESCO recommendation on open education resources. We recently developed material on media and information literacy, which need to be integrated into the educational system. And the motto for that is think critically, click wisely. Before you click, think critically. See the source of that information. Try to verify it. See whether it's quality information, whether it was checked before or not. Think critically. We need to develop the critical mindset among our learners to avoid the rote learning that the minister mentioned before. I am a product of rote learning. And when I reached New York University for my PhD, and I said, be innovative and think out of the box. I said, where is the box first? Then I tried to think outside of the box, because I only was taught through rote learning. How can we be creative? How can we be innovative if we don't develop the thinking, the critical thinking capability in the students? Finally, I would like to mention a major manifesto. It's called the Public Library Manifesto, which is developed by the International Federation of Libraries Association, IFLA, and UNESCO, specifically the Information for All program, the IFAP of UNESCO. This manifesto, we believe, is very important because it serves as a powerful tool for national and local governments to proactively support and engage in the development of public libraries. We believe also that it helps libraries to work with communities and with the education system, and this could be an essential partner in the transforming education effort. Let me stop here because I know that we have some technical experts to contribute to this discussion. I can only say that UNESCO remains committed to continue what it has started through open educational resources and through media and information literacy, because these are, we believe, part of the solution in transforming education that is fit for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Director General. And I think the point you make about customising education and the facility that OER will give us to customise education for people is really key. Rather than run the risk of harking back to the olden days of education, of people standing here and lecturing young people about what education is all about, it's important we also have a youth voice. And so to that end, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Brighton Kauma, who's the SDSN youth representative. Please.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited and very pleased to be here today and to also listen to the honorable ministers, including Professor Sachs. Since yesterday, we've engaged in a number of deliberations. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, spoke strongly about the art of listening, both listening to the current generation of young people about how they would want this education to be transformed. Yesterday itself, we launched a very landmark document, which is the Youth Declaration on Transforming Education, emphasizing the role of decolonizing education and giving young people opportunities and pathways for learning and transformation. Since 2015, SDSN Youth, with the support of SDSN, has been mobilizing young people, and our pathway to innovation and building the next generation of ethical leaders is quite unique. We believe that for one to make the right informed decisions, they need to be educated. So over the last 5 years, we've mobilized about 4,100 young people across 127 countries, giving them an understanding to the SDGs, showing them pathways to understanding the challenges their communities face, and ultimately giving them the practical tools for them to take action for sustainable development. And we are seeing transformation in their communities and how they've become responsive to the needs of their communities. Across our global programs, we are working on sustainable campuses through our SDG Students program, practically giving young people opportunities for them to educate others and give them tools and skills to take action in communities. We believe that by 2030, it is estimated that about 50% of the global population will live in urban cities. So how do we educate the next generation of young people to think about mobility, to think about reducing the urban heat highland, to think about ways through which we can live in cities that are responsive to the climate? We are at a defining moment in history where we have 1.8 billion young people. And trust me, this is the only opportunity that we can leverage and take advantage of this demographic dividend. If young people are not empowered today, if they're not given the tools and skills to become informed leaders, then posterity will judge us harshly. But at the same point, it's about accessing these tools. We've tried to access these tools through different platforms. Professor Sachs referred to the SDG Academy, which has a plethora of tools, and SDSN youth members around the world are accessing these tools and taking action in their respective communities. But also intergenerational education is critical. As an African born and raised in Zambia, I remember how storytelling was a critical aspect to learning. And through the Vatican Youth Symposium, SDSN Youth and its partners, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and Social Sciences, bring together leaders in business and government, creating strong alliances for learning and education. I believe that creating opportunities through financing these open education resources is the only pathway to empowering young people. We are not supposed to be stingy with information and education. If we can be generous and think about today's youth as the leaders of tomorrow, then we are going to transform this education. I believe that a transformed education is an education that is responsive to the needs of today's youth, which includes responsive to young people's belief in climate change, young people's belief in mental well-being, but also, most importantly, young people's strong values in justice and creating fair economies. All of us can play a critical role, And it's up to us to think about how we can contribute to transforming an education that is fair and just. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important insight that you've given us in terms of the views of young people and how we can properly use OER. So we're just going to change the panel now and bring in some of the technical experts who will tell us how we can actually roll out OER in the real world and bring it from sort of the concept and the high level we're discussing to actually real actionable activity and real impact on people's lives. So I'm going to invite the speakers to the next panel to come up and thank the current set of speakers. Thank you all very much, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Okay, well, thank you very much. And now we're going to move ahead with the next segment here. So I'm going to hand across, first of all, to the Vice President of SDSN, Professor Patrick Wall from University College Dublin.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction to what we're going to do on this panel. So I'm the Director of the SDG Academy in my role as Vice President for Education and SDSN. And of course, what Jeff says, we produce open education resources, but the challenge is, the thing we start to think about is how do we share them across countries? Or how can we actually get it to a point where people can use our resource, they can update it, translate it into different language, put their own culture and context into the resource. This team started to think about this, and one of the first presentations we gave was at the UN STI, Science, Technology, Innovation Forum. Because if you think about what is the objective there, the TFM is to actually transfer knowledge across nations. And one of the things we started to think about was the possibilities that libraries and digital infrastructures in libraries, and let's call them highways between nations, could offer us. Is there any way we could exploit this in terms of disseminating knowledge across nations, and also the opportunity, to catalogue it properly, protect the intellectual property, allow people in to update, to translate, to bring in their local context. So before I let the panel start talking, I just want to remind the meeting that under the UN TESS concept note, we are aligned to the following recommendation: build and maintain robust, free, public digital learning content and platforms. Okay? And I'd also like to remind the meeting that on Monday, leaders in their statements are asked to do this, right? So in terms of commitments to steering the digital transformation for just and equitable learning, this includes: are there initiatives in your country to create and maintain free, open curriculum, aligned digital resources and platforms as part of a digital commons? Who is in charge? What entity oversees it? And are they sufficiently resourced? Okay, so the leaders on the test on Monday are all asked to think about including this in their statement. And they probably are very confused at the moment how to answer that question. So it's really lucky that we have the group we have together to tell them the solution. And what we're doing here is to give you a solution offering for that statement. And of course, we will send this off to all the ministers to help them make that type of commitment in their statements on Monday. So without further ado, we're going to talk about 6 actions and commitments to get this solution offering going. So basically the UNESCO OER recommendation. So we'll start on the protocol for what we call fair OERs. Then we look at the recommendation and open licenses. We look at commitments curriculum. We'll go into different types of standard settings and so on across the UN library system and open libraries. And then we look at, once those open resources are all there, the possibilities that creates for use of these resources in the public and private sphere. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thanks very much, Professor Walsh. So now I'm going to hand across to Niamh Brennan from Trinity College Dublin and Open Air, and she's going to give us a very short presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Donal. Is this on? Thank you very much, Donal, and thank you everybody for being here at this late hour in the day. I am honoured to be here to talk to you today about a fair deal and a caring deal for open education resources, or how to leverage OER for sustainable development in really practical ways. We have the OER, the recommendations from UNESCO. We've all agreed that we're going to do this. Now we're going to talk about how we're going to do it. And we heard earlier in a previous session, Mr. Leonardo Garnier, the UN Secretary General for Advisor for Transforming Education Summit, said, this is not happening fast enough. We have no time to lose. So let's see what we have to do. So first of all, we heard some inspiring tales today from the ministers from Ghana and from Greece, and we're blown away. You know, I'm really in awe about what they're doing. But unfortunately, that is not the case for all of us. We know this for all countries. So we can tell, you know, accelerated or catalyzed by the global pandemic, that there is a huge pressure on education internationally. And we saw what happened. We now see that there is the pluses around open educational resources for sustainability, or we know that there's an urgent need, that there are multiple benefits to this for multiple stakeholders throughout society. We also know that there's massive investment and value in this, that OER are growing rapidly, and that they're essential not only for SDG 4, but for all of the SDGs. I'm afraid I have to tell you a little bit of bad news, but there is a solution. Okay, there's poor discoverability. That's a word we like to use about. You can't find it really easily by just Googling. We can't rely on Google just to look after this for us. That the open education resources are currently disconnected around the world. It's really hard for your average school teacher to find the resources that they need because there's quite a lot out there and there's no quality assurance. It's fragmented, there's poor interoperability, there's no quality assurance, as I mentioned, the infrastructure isn't great, and there's limited availability to potential users. So the problem is, what's the good of having everything out there and available if people can't find it, right? Right? So, and also, where the magic happens, where machines can come in and help this, if the machines don't have any structure to go in and give a blueprint for how they're going to do it, they can't do that either, right? But we know how to fix this. So Otto and Kerameus said the focus needs to shift to intelligent ways of linking and increasing interconnectedness. So that's what we're talking about. There's a protocol there already from the research world, something similar to education. It's valuable, it's, you know, it's distributed, it's not easily described, and they call it FAIR. FAIR is a protocol in operation around the world now, supported by funders, institutions, and it's a set protocol describing how to make the resources in a standardized way findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we have people on the panel here today who know exactly how to do that for OER. We just need you to help us to get support for doing that, okay? So that's what we want to do, and we want those plans for doing that to be integrated, to be embedded in the DNA of the OERs themselves. Why? Because it helps us. It's not glamorous. These are the Cinderellas of the OER world, but somehow they send the OERs to the ball to dance, to make the magic happen. I'm suggesting these 5 steps. So these are practical steps. Define the standards. They're out there already. There's wonderful work that's going on from Spark Europe, from Open Air, also led by the University of Athens, this huge project, and many others that I can't mention today. Establish an equitable, diverse and expert working group to come together quickly on this. We have no time to waste. This is not to be another endless talking shop. We need decisions on the metadata protocols, identifiers and taxonomies that we're going to hear something about today, and the licenses. Then we inform, upskill, motivate, and for the policymakers here, whether they're in higher education institutions or governments, mandate that this is done. Make it happen. And reward it. Recognise it when it does happen. Then we can deposit these fair, what we call fair compliant resources in the repositories, so immediately we've got this availability around the world that can be accessed by anybody, anywhere, downloaded reliably, but not just for today, but forever. They have persistent identifiers. So the server goes down. It doesn't matter. The links will still work, right? So that's really important. We put huge investment into these resources. We don't want them to die, to be no good in 5 years or 10 years' time, right? We need to be able to harvest and aggregate, and this is commonplace. Many of us know about this already in our repositories. And then the final stage is where all the good things happen, is to offer easy customization and localization. This can all happen, but we have to do the basic laborious work of describing this according to the right standards, just like we do for everything else that we do, whether it's building roads or bridges. This is building an infrastructure. So to finish with this, we're not only talking about FAIR here, we're talking about CARE is another protocol, but it's the people-oriented side to data stewardship. And educational resources are data after all. CARE stands for Collective Benefit, Authority to Control, Responsibility and Ethics. And believe it or not, we can also build that into our resources. Okay? So our call to action is, as Paul described, to establish these publicly owned platforms and repositories, ensure the best educational resources are available under license, develop the partnerships, encourage the content developers to join this OER movement, put people over profit. We look forward to going down this path with you. For our world to flourish, we need education systems that put equity at the centre of its core philosophies. Together, we must advocate for open, fair, CARE education resources for all. In this way, we can emulate what we've seen from Ghana. We can leapfrog. We can take our education resources and put them into the kind of dimension that will serve our 1.8 billion young people, the generation that we must look after right now, and that we must make sure that our society and our planet survives. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Niamh. And now we're going to move to our one video intervention, which technology permitting. We will now hear from Zeynep Vargul, who's the Programme Specialist and Coordinator of the OER Dynamic Coalition within UNESCO.
Good afternoon. My name is Zeynep Vargul, and I'm the Programme Specialist for Technologies in Education and Coordinator of the UNESCO OER Dynamic Coalition at the Communication and Information Sector of UNESCO. Today I'm going to speak to you about the UNESCO OER Recommendation 2019 and the related OER Dynamic Coalition. The UNESCO OER Recommendation 2019 is a UNESCO legal standard setting instrument. The UNESCO recommendation is basically as it means semantically. It's a document adopted at the intergovernmental level which recommends governments to take actions in a certain number of areas and to report to UNESCO on their actions every 4 years. This is the first and only legal instrument of UNESCO in the area of technologies in education. The OER recommendation provides a clear definition of both OER and open licensing. Stakeholders recognized in this instrument include not only the educational community, but also cultural institutions such as libraries, archives, as well as, of course, copyright holders and authors. The OER recommendation covers actions in 5 areas of work. The first area is capacity building. This includes capacity building to create, access, reuse, redistribute OER, and the development and maintenance of openly licensed tools and platforms. The second area is that of policy. Issues that are addressed include procurement models and alignment between OER policies and other open licensing policies in, for example, open access, open data, open source software, and open science. The third area is quality multilingual inclusive OER. This refers to ensuring that OER is available in languages other than English, that it's accessible for persons with disabilities, as well as issues related to the quality of OER. The next area is sustainability, and this refers to the development and maintenance of sustainability models based on the principle that users and teachers shouldn't shoulder the costs of learning materials. The fifth area is on international cooperation. The OER Dynamic Coalition was developed to support collaboration between the sharing of best practices between stakeholders as well as between regions. Some key activities of the OER Dynamic Coalition are on this slide for information. In closing, we'd like to invite you to join the OER Dynamic Coalition to have more information on ongoing activities and to share your activities with the OER community. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
So just to continue our discussion in relation to the OER recommendations and commitments, I'd like to call on Dr. Cable Green, Director of the Open Knowledge Creative Commons, for a few remarks.
Thank you, ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here today. I will discuss the importance of openly licensing the knowledge that we collectively need to create effective education solutions for sustainable development. We need to ensure that publicly funded educational resources and research is openly licensed by default. The public should have unfettered legal and technical access to the knowledge that the public pays for. We simply cannot solve the world's biggest problems when the knowledge about those problems is closed and locked behind paywalls. Just last month, Creative Commons and our partners Spark and IFLA launched an open climate campaign to open the world's scientific research about climate change and biodiversity preservation. As we build and share open educational resources, the legal details matter. For learning to thrive at scale in an equitable way, educational resources must be freely available, openly licensed, available in all languages, adaptable, and contextually relevant. For an open educational resource to be open, it must be available both at no cost and it must be openly licensed or dedicated to the public domain so that others may legally reuse, adapt, and share that OER. Open licenses are foundational to OER. The legal rights to adapt are critical for regional and local uses, translations, and iterative innovations as we improve the educational resources over time. To do open licensing correctly, we need to use clear, standard, international open licenses that work around the globe. The world has used Creative Commons open licenses for 20 years to create and share open educational resources with the public. CC is the global nonprofit that stewards these open licenses to make it easy and legal for the world to share educational resources, scientific research, art, other cultural works, data, and more. The CC licenses are free to use, and we have dedicated all of them to the public domain to ensure that they're there for our future. They are built on top of and respect copyright law and ensure authors and creators get credit when they share their work. CC licensed knowledge in one country can be legally used in every other country instantly as soon as it's openly licensed. Creative Commons and a global community of open education practitioners stand ready to support your governments and your educational institutions as you learn about open licensing and implement the UNESCO recommendation on OER. Please do contact me anytime I can be of assistance. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. And I'm being told from the side that I'm instructed to encourage the later speakers to be as brief and concise as possible while still giving us the benefit of your wisdom. I might now call on Jayashri Wyatt, who's the Chief Education Outreach Section for the United Nations Academic Impact. Please.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here today to represent the United Nations Academic Impact Initiative as a co-organizer of today's session. Obviously, a critical driver of sustainable development is inclusive education because it is a master key to transforming lives and societies. Yesterday, with the Youth Declaration, we also saw how important it is to keep young people at the very heart of this educational transformation. And as we heard from our colleague, our youth speaker today, how important it is for that transformation and that education to be fair and just. So in the spirit of telling you about, the how of what we're doing, I want to tell you a little bit about UNAI. For the last 10 years, the United Nations Academic Impact, it's a network of 1,600 institutions of higher learning from over 150 countries around the world. We have convened and fostered international cooperation in alignment with the principles of the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals, and promoted the research, the data, the curriculum, and best practices of our member institutions through our SDG workshops, which reach thousands of young people every year. So it's imperative that institutions of higher learning play a central role in shaping and developing free, accessible digital learning curriculum and content to accelerate the implementation of UNESCO's Open Education Resource Recommendation. So today, I'm really pleased to announce that the UN Academic Impact Initiative is going to be launching a repository called the Sdgs Toolkit. It will house the best practices, content, curricula, and projects related to the SDGs curated from our UNAI members. It will be a dynamic trove of content, and it will be accessible at no cost, and we will be progressively translating it into the UN official languages. So we look forward to rolling up our sleeves and working with all these amazing partners and stakeholders and young people so that this digital repository will harness the power of learning and robust knowledge sharing. We also heard about the great work today that governments are doing as well, and we just want to really encourage governments and institutions of higher learning to join us, to join the network of the United Nations Academic Impact. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for that. I'd now like to ask Ms. Trina Jensen, Manager of the Digital Transformation in and of Higher Education at the IAU, to give us a few brief remarks.
Thank you. The International Association of Universities was created more than 70 years ago by UNESCO to foster international collaboration and mutual understanding among higher education institutions around the world. We are an independent NGO housed in UNESCO headquarters and working with higher education institutions and organizations worldwide. Fostering international collaboration is the backbone of our operations, and it is in this context that I would like to share our commitment to the implementation of the UNESCO recommendation on OERs. The strategic priorities of our association, sustainable development, internationalization, and digital transformation are all essential ingredients to make this project presented here in this session a reality. As this session is linked to the thematic track on digital transformation, it is also a pleasure for me to share that the IAU is presenting a new policy statement to its General Conference that is entitled Transforming Higher Education in a Digital World for the Global Common Good. This is the result of extensive consultations with members, students, and experts from all regions of the world to outline and highlight the principles and values that we believe are essential for the digital transformation of higher education. principles and values that we can share across countries, regions, and type of institutions. This policy statement makes reference to UNESCO OER recommendation and expresses support for its implementation. It is essential that we shape the use of technology to ensure that it contributes to improving human condition and to creating sustainable societies. The Partnership for OER Repositories is one way of implementing these principles by proposing repositories of resources that are shared in the public domain, thereby generating knowledge commons that can serve higher education around the world and support the implementation of the SDGs. This is a way of leveraging digital transformation for good, as we allude to in the title of our policy statement. In this policy statement, we recognize technologies as a tool that is merely a means to an end. What is essential is that we jointly build a humanistic, ethical, inclusive, and purpose-based digital transformation of higher education for the common global good. IAU is committed to raising awareness among its members and partners for the positive benefits of this partnership, as well as to encourage participation from all continents. This is important to ensure linguistic and cultural diversity in the available resources. As there is not a lot of room for discussions around higher education at this summit, it is my pleasure to end by inviting you to attend, or the universities in your countries, the upcoming Iau General Conference taking place in Dublin. The theme of this conference is directly linked to the discussions we have during this TESS event, as we will be discussing the relevance and value of universities to future society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn now to Radhika Iyengar from the Earth Institute, Columbia University, and the SDSN networks.
Thank you so much. It is my honor to be here. I'm Radhika Iyengar. I work with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, so you can imagine the pressure that I have working with a boss like this. I try to be as updated as possible with all my experiences, but a couple of things I want to mention today, which are observations from my end and have not been covered in the panel so far. So one is definitely we need open resources. K-12 education, especially teachers, go through a turmoil of a day every day. So many different realities, so many different changes. Sometimes they are online, sometimes they are offline, sometimes their children have social emotional learning needs. There are a whole whirlwind of issues that are coming in every day. So along with open resources, it is not a one-all done deal that you put up resources and everything will be utilized. No, we know that. It needs to be continuously updated with real-time feedback, with updates on the current issues, pre-COVID, after COVID. So I just want to add this element of real-time updates on teacher resources. If one is feeling ill, they don't take, if they keep waiting to get a fever reducer, after 5 days, it's not going to help. They will suffer for 5 days. So I urge that we, along with open resources, we also have a real-time updating of curriculum, a real-time updating of teacher feedbacks, along with the open resources. Higher education institutions can do much more. Higher education institutions can do these teacher trainings, refreshers, including certifications. I'm not talking about diplomas, I'm talking about pre-teacher certifications online. There are many teachers who cannot afford to go to universities or institutions. So if this is a part of our reality now, where many teachers are mothers like me, I have 2 children, they'll not be able to go and afford a different, go to a different university and get a degree. If we can have these universities, including Columbia University, a part of a consortium of universities where they can get online refreshers, online teacher pre-certifications, I think that will really create a dent in when the teachers need the need refreshers, they'll be able to get it. So those are the teacher observations. The second part I wanted to focus on is also lifelong learning approaches. I think there is much needs to be done in providing lifelong learning resources. Another element that I want to focus on this is that I don't think adults need to be providing resources to students. The students can provide a lot of resources to the adults. They can create their own curriculum. They can create their own materials that they want to learn and research on. So my colleague Mariam is here. Mariam Rabi runs SDSN, SDGs today, and we have been working together on creating story maps. And the students themselves create these story maps, which are stories of local SDGs in their own towns, and how do they reflect on the local SDGs, and how do these local SDGs and story maps translate into lesson plans. If we can focus on the link between creating storytelling ideas from the students themselves and adding that to a repository of lesson plans for the teachers, then it will have a much more of a youth voice in the lessons that they are getting, rather than the teacher and the system and everything else providing these lesson plans to them. So these are a couple of ideas that Mission 4.7, you can go on our website, mission4.7.org is a consortium of organizations, including the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, Columbia University, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, along with Ban Ki-moon Center and UNESCO, have combined forces to accumulate resources, teacher lesson plans, student resources, as well as policy advising for ministers who are looking to promote SDG 4.7, which is basically education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. So these are two important pillars that we are focusing on, along with our patrons, former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Professor Sachs, and others who have combined their forces to see how can we make SDG 4.7 the pillar of transforming education. It discusses transformative education using the lens of education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. So I urge all the members here, along with the youth, along with all the organizations here, and my esteemed colleagues who are sitting at the panel with me, who have all these amazing platforms, to combine our forces together with Mission 4.7 so that we are able to bridge this gap, this real-time gap that we see in curricular resources, as well as the voices from the youth that are really shouting at us and saying, when are we going to be included in the curriculums? I hope everyone can collaborate and work on these issues together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we really are running short on time, so I'm going to urge the remaining panelists to be as brief and concise as they possibly can. And just to speak to the next speaker, which is Mr. Thanos Giannakopoulos, Mr. Thanos Giannakopoulos, if I'm close enough, who's Chief of the Dag Hammarskjöld Library here at the UN.
Thank you very much to you and SDSN for the invitation. Esteemed colleagues, I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about the United Nations libraries and what we do in order to walk the walk and not only talk the talk. So the United Nations Knowledge Commons is a suite of programs initiated by the UN libraries on the global UN Secretariat. We harvest UN resources that are released online in the public domain. We want to offer these resources to citizens worldwide in a meaningful way, free of charge, through interconnected repositories, the main of which is the UN Digital Library, developed and managed by the UN libraries in New York, Geneva, Vienna, Beirut, and Bangkok. The UN Digital Library is a developing and dynamic central repository, collects, preserves, and disseminates UN resources. It is a platform that brings deliberations, decisions, and actions of the organization's main organs at the citizens' fingertips. It was launched in 2018, and it has become a standard source of reference for UN-produced content, with a search interface in the 6 official languages. In 2021, it recorded more than 60 million downloads from over 10,000 cities worldwide. Please contact me so you could have a widget of the UN Digital Library on your university website, your department website, your school websites, so your students and researchers can actually search there the documents and publications of the United Nations. However, as we mentioned before, we live at a time that simply releasing a resource online means little in the deluge of information that is flooding our screens. To ensure intelligibility by machines, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs Statistics Division and the UN Library have together produced an SDGs Taxonomy, a tagging system, if you will, which allows online aggregators to connect, discover, or point to resources without human interventions. The SDGs Taxonomy is approved by the United Nations Central Executive Board for Coordination, which is a high-level body within the UN system, and is available for all to use. So please, again, contact me, and we'll be happy to offer more resources on that. So this amount of evolving work undertaken by a handful of UN libraries showcases that we need not to reinvent the wheel when we talk of the need for infrastructure to secure national education commons or global science commons for the SDGs. A commons that will offer publicly funded research and educational programs back to the public who funded it in the first place through taxation. Libraries prioritize openness, inclusion of marginalized communities, and equitable access to knowledge. They form a network of networks well equipped to understand the intricacies of protecting the global public good, the education and scientific output, which must remain openly accessible. Libraries are embedded in local communities, are mindful about the digital divide while still developing very successful institutional repositories. In the realm of digital information monopolies, library repositories will highlight digital resources that a search engine or your social medium may not show you or even suppress. And to this, I'd like to close with an invitation to the 4th Global Open Science Conference that the UN Library is organizing, and to reflect a little bit on the intervention by Professor Sachs, where he mentioned about the subscription costs of journals, of reputed journals. I wanted to bring a story of a young researcher in San Diego University who told me that she had to pay $11,000 in order to publish an article in a reputed journal. And that came on top of the budget to those subscription costs that the library and the institution actually has to bear. So I think there is something that needs to change in the incentive system of the academic world, and we would like to invite you to discuss this in the upcoming Open Science Conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And unfortunately, time really has run away from us, so I think we probably have literally 1 or 1.5 minutes for each of the remaining speakers before they will turn off the microphones on us. So I will turn now to Claire McGuire of the Policy Research Office of the International Federation of Library Associations, IFLA.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. We've been talking a lot about the formal education system during this summit, and that's critical, but for education to be truly transformative, truly intergenerational, and truly lifelong, we must look to non-formal and informal education providers as partners. And I'm speaking on behalf of the global library field, the libraries in our schools, our universities, our cities, and our communities. And I'm delighted to take this opportunity to echo the Assistant Director General, Dr. Jelassi, in highlighting the recent update to the IFLA UNESCO Public Library Manifesto that was launched in July of 2022. This document, it underlines the role of the global library field in enabling equitable access to knowledge for all learners. IFLA is currently also working on an updated school library manifesto that truly underlines that libraries are partners. So to not take too much time, I will urge everyone, ministers, look to your library associations, look to the libraries in your communities, in your countries as partners, as co-creators in transforming education. And IFLA is here to help you in that process. Libraries are here to help us transform education together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll turn now to Amanda Abrom, Program Manager of the Global Schools.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda. As he said, I'm the Program Manager of the Global Schools Program. I see a lot of people out here from our network, and thank you so much for joining us. We are a program that is built by youth, led by youth, and run by youth. We carry out innovative teacher training on education for sustainable development, literacy, and pedagogy for teachers all over the world in 90 countries. Last year, we trained about 500 teachers that through WhatsApp and online means that then went on to train an additional 12,000 teachers and 30,000 community members and parents on sustainable development literacy. We disseminate comprehensive resources and lesson plans and workshops to teachers so that they can adapt these to their local realities. We really put teachers at the center to give them the tools and professional development, mentors, online community, and lesson plans to support students and implement long-term and school-wide changes. We really believe it's more important than ever in this interconnected world for teachers to be able to disseminate ideas, share concepts, and learn from their fellow peers. That's why we pledge to continue to provide more public case studies and lesson plans and resources on platforms discussed, such as the ones today. Yesterday, we heard some incredible interventions from the ministers of Portugal and Sierra Leone about how students and youth are co-creating curriculum and resources. So we invite you, if you are out there, to be a part of this conversation and to support us and to submit case studies, lesson plans, or anything that will help push forward these best practices. So we applaud the efforts that were discussed today and look forward to seeing all the ideas discussed really mature into impactful solutions for teachers all over the world. And to be brief, please come and discuss with me afterwards and check out the globalschoolsprogram.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And I turn now to our second last speaker, who is Kenza Khallafi of the Mohammed VI Foundation for Environmental Protection.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting the Mohammed VI Foundation for Environmental Protection, presided by Her Royal Highness Princess Lala Asnaf, to this important event. The foundation, under the presidency of Her Royal Highness, has been particularly committed to education for sustainable development since 20 years now. I would like to go directly to the point, due to the time, to share with you the pilot phase of the global schools in Morocco. So everything started after the Vatican Symposium in 2019, where we have been invited by SDSN to be part of the pilot phase with Ghana and Turkey. So the pilot centered on two core objectives: localizing the core ESD competencies as defined by UNESCO, documenting the localization process in Morocco, and developing a localizing toolkits that other ministries of education could use and duplicate in their respective countries. So directly to the report, to give you some indicators. Given that Morocco uses a single national curriculum, it was possible to be supported by teachers and educational inspectors from different parts of the country. We conducted more than 10 regional, national and regional workshops with educators. We analyzed more than 250 books of the national curriculum. But the question was, how teachers integrate in schools this content? What students are learning? What is their feedback on such new experiences of learning about SDGs, among other topics? So the lessons have been elaborated in a collaborative way with the Ministry of Education of Morocco. And we also tested and evaluated more than 12 courses that were developed by the country team. These courses were meant to be locally relevant to SDG, global citizenship education in Morocco. So we selected more than 12 schools to do this pilot phase. The indicators that the students felt that more than 93% of students agreed that the new concept of SDGs presented with were easy and simple. 25% instructors noticed an increase in student participation. In the middle and high school students, yes. 61 social competencies acquired by students. So today we have these lessons that are free, accessible to all the community in the Kingdom of Morocco. So we are trying to duplicate this pilot phase in other schools. And please check the reports for the time that we have today. So thank you very much.
Thank you much. As we did start about 15 minutes late, I'm going to beg the indulgence of the organisers for 60 seconds for our very last speaker, Mr. John Schwartz, Head of Business Development from edX 2 and 2U.
Look, just very quickly, we've had this global problem about how to provide access to top education or education for hundreds of millions of people. And all I want to say, and it's something that I've repeated over the years, edX, founded and funded by Harvard and MIT and 220 of the top institutions in the world, provides free access to anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of socioeconomic status or religion. It's a very underutilized platform that anybody can have access to. And given what's going to happen in the next 8 years with 70% of the world's jobs becoming obsolete, I would implore every minister of education and every politician to break down all the barriers of partisanship and adopt platforms like this, which can really make an impactful difference to millions and millions of lives.
Thank you very much.